My Weird School, Book Number 9, Miss Lazar is Bizarre, written by Dan Gutman, pictures by Jim Palott. Chapter 9, Sad, Depressed Mr. Klutz. We were in the vomitorium eating lunch the next day. I gave Michael my tuna sandwich, and Ryan gave me his cookies. I told Ryan that he might want to eat a few napkins for dessert because he likes eating paper so much. He said I should shut up. Me and Michael and Ryan promised we wouldn't tell anyone about Miss Lazar's weird toilet bowl plunger museum. If she found out that we knew, she would know we snuck into her secret room. I looked over at the next table where Andrea and her annoying friends sit. It had been a really long time since I bothered her, so I thought that maybe I should bother her to stay in practice. The only problem was Andrea had this sad look on her face. She looked so worried. I didn't want to shoot a straw wrapper at her or even hit her on the head with an empty milk carton. Andrea saw me looking, and she came over to our table with her annoying friend Emily. "I'm worried about Mr. Klutz," she said. "What about him?" I asked. "I think he's depressed," Andrea said. "I think he's jealous of Miss Lazar." "What?" Ryan said. "You're crazy." "Did you see the look on his face when Miss Lazar unclogged the toilet?" Andrea asked. "And when she climbed up to the roof? Did you ever see how he looks when we all cheer for Miss Lazar?" "He does look kind of sad," I agreed. "My mother is a psychologist," Andrea said. "She told me all about this stuff. I think Mr. Klutz is depressed because the principal is supposed to rule the school, but everybody acts like Miss Lazar is the big hero all the time. It's almost like Miss Lazar is the real principal." "You're right," said Michael. "We've got to do something," said Emily. We thought and thought and thought about what we could do to cheer up Mr. Klutz. Andrea said we should do something that would make Mr. Klutz feel like a hero for a change. Ryan said we should start an emergency. Michael remembered that Miss Lazar has the day off every Wednesday, and today was Wednesday. If we started an emergency, Mr. Klutz would have to be the hero. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's starting emergencies. So I tried to think of an emergency I could start. That's when I got the greatest idea in the history of the world. "Mr. Klutz said he used to be a rock climber, right?" I asked. "And when Miss Lazar climbed up the school, he said it was simple rock climbing. Well, let's throw something up on the roof of the school. Then we can ask Mr. Klutz to get it." "That's a dumb idea," said Michael. "That's the dumbest idea in the history of the world," said Ryan. "AJ, you're a genius," said Andrea. "Ooh," Ryan said. "AJ and Andrea are in love." "When are you gonna get married?" asked Michael. "Shut up," I said. Chapter 10, A New Hero. Luckily, it was a nice day, so we had outside recess. We all went out to the playground. Andrea said we could throw her lunchbox up on the roof of the school. I'm the best thrower, so I got the job of throwing Andrea's lunchbox up on the roof. The first couple of tries, I didn't reach the roof, and the lunchbox almost hit a window on the second floor. It's hard to throw a lunchbox. But finally, on the third try, I got the lunchbox up on the roof. Next, we had to get Mr. Klutz. We rushed into the school and went down the hall to his office. Mr. Klutz's office is really cool. He has a big snowboarding poster on the wall and a foosball table in the corner. When we came in, he was wearing his boxing shorts and punching his punching bag. Mr. Klutz is really good at sports. We decided that Andrea should do the talking because she takes acting lessons after school, and it was her lunchbox that was up on the roof. "Mr. Klutz," she said, "we have an emergency. AJ threw my lunchbox up on the roof. My lunch was in it. If I don't eat my lunch, I'll starve and die. We need your help." Andrea is a really good actress. She should be in movies. "I'm so hungry," added Andrea, rubbing her tummy. "Why did you throw Andrea's lunchbox up on the roof, AJ?" asked Mr. Klutz. I didn't think Mr. Klutz was going to ask that. He looked at me. I looked at Andrea. Why did she have to go and tell Mr. Klutz I was the one who threw her lunchbox up on the roof? Andrea looked at me, too. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I had to think fast. "My invisible friend told me to do it," I said. "Your invisible friend?" said Mr. Klutz. "Hey, you never told us you had an invisible friend, AJ," said Michael. "Yeah, what's your invisible friend's name?" asked Ryan. Actually, I wasn't completely lying. I used to have an invisible friend, but me and my invisible friend got into an argument one day, and after that, we weren't friends anymore. I just used him to blame stuff on when I made mistakes. "It doesn't matter what the invisible friend's name is," said Andrea. "Mr. Klutz, we need you to climb up on the roof and get my lunchbox. Please, please, please." At first, Mr. Klutz didn't want to do it. But I guess Andrea was such a good actress that he took off his boxing gloves and followed us out to the playground. He looked up at the wall of the school. "It doesn't look too difficult," Mr. Klutz said. "I used to climb walls like this all the time in my younger days." "I bet you can do it," I said. Mr. Klutz dug his toe into a crack between two bricks and started pulling himself up the wall. "Look!" one of the kids in the playground shouted. "Mr. Klutz is climbing the school!" All the kids at recess came over to watch. Mr. Klutz was a fast climber. He was already halfway up to the roof. "It's working like a charm," Andrea whispered. "Mr. Klutz will be the hero." Mr. Klutz got all the way up to the top and climbed on the roof. He found Andrea's lunchbox and tossed it down. "Hooray!" we all started shouting. "Hooray for Mr. Klutz! Hip, hip, hooray! He's our hero!" Mr. Klutz turned around and started lowering himself from the roof. He got a few feet down, and then suddenly he stopped. "What's the matter, Mr. Klutz?" somebody shouted. I'm stuck," he yelled. Chapter 11. Another Emergency. Mr. Klutz was just hanging there off the side of the school, a few feet from the top. We all gasped. Somebody ran to get Miss Daisy and Mrs. Cooney, the school nurse. Miss Daisy had helped us once before when Mr. Klutz got stuck on the top of the flagpole and had to be lowered down. "You're doing great," Andrea shouted up to Mr. Klutz. "Keep going." "I can't," Mr. Klutz yelled down. "Then go up to the top," Ryan shouted up. "I can't," Mr. Klutz yelled down. "Why not?" we all shouted up. "I'm afraid I'll fall," Mr. Klutz yelled down. I guess it's a lot easier to climb up a wall than it is to climb back down a wall. Mr. Klutz was frozen up there. He couldn't move. By that time, the whole school was outside watching him. Miss Moll, our gym teacher, had some kids go get a bunch of tumbling mats from the gym. She put them on the ground below Mr. Klutz, so if he fell, he wouldn't end up like Humpty Dumpty. "This is all your fault, AJ," said Andrea. "You're the one who said we should start an emergency." "Hey, you were the one who said he was depressed," I told Andrea. "And you said I was a genius. It's your fault." "Is not. Is too." We went on like that for a while, until Mrs. Cooney said she was going to call the fire department on her cell phone. They could bring over a long ladder and rescue Mr. Klutz. "Don't call the fire department," yelled down Mr. Klutz. "Why not?" asked Mrs. Cooney. "I play racquetball with the fire chief once a week," Mr. Klutz yelled down. "If he finds out about this, he'll never let me hear the end of it." "So what should we do?" asked Miss Daisy. "Call Miss Lazar," yelled down Mr. Klutz. "But it's her day off," said Miss Daisy. "Just call her." Chapter 12. Hooray for Miss Lazar! It was the most amazing sight in the history of the world. Mr. Klutz was hanging off the side of the school. He could fall at any moment, and we would get to see it, live and in person. It was a real Kodak moment. You should have been there. One of the teachers ran to the office to get Miss Lazar's home phone number. Mrs. Cooney called the number on her cell phone. "Tell her to hurry," yelled down Mr. Klutz. "I can't hang on here forever." It was about 1,100,000 hours until we heard the sound of Miss Lazar's scooter buzzing up the street. She screeched to a halt and hopped off. Everybody cheered. "This looks like a job for super custodian," said Miss Lazar. "How did you get up there, Mr. Klutz?" "Never mind that," he yelled. "How am I going to get down?" Miss Lazar looked at the wall. She looked at Mr. Klutz. Then she looked at me. "AJ," she said, "remember the secret room I showed you in my office? I need you to run down there as fast as you can. Open the door and get my blue plunger. It has a hole in the wooden handle." "Why do you want a toilet plunger now?" I asked. "Go," Miss Lazar said. "Duty calls." Miss Lazar said duty again. I ran as fast as I could to Miss Lazar's office. I grabbed the blue plunger from the wall in the secret room. When I ran back out to the playground with it, Miss Lazar had already climbed up to the roof of the school. She had a rope in her hand. Mr. Klutz was still hanging off the wall a few feet below her. "Throw me the plunger, AJ," Miss Lazar yelled. I threw the plunger up on the roof, being careful not to hit Mr. Klutz with it. Miss Lazar tied the rope to the plunger. "What's she doing?" somebody asked. "Who knows?" Michael said. Miss Lazar leaned over the edge of the roof with a toilet bowl plunger in her hand. "Okay, Mr. Klutz," she said. "I need you to hold steady. I'm going to mash this plunger against the top of your head." "What?" yelled Mr. Klutz. "After the plunger is stuck to your head," said Miss Lazar, "I'll be able to lower you down to the ground." "That's crazy," said Miss Daisy, "but it just might work." Miss Lazar jammed the plunger against Mr. Klutz's shiny bald head until it stuck there. "Does it feel like it's on good and tight?" asked Miss Lazar. "Yes," said Mr. Klutz, "but this is very embarrassing." "Don't worry about that," said Miss Lazar. "Now I want you to let go of the wall with your hands and feet." "I'm scared," said Mr. Klutz. "I've got you," shouted Miss Lazar. Mr. Klutz let go of the wall. Miss Lazar held the rope tight. The plunger stuck to Mr. Klutz's head like glue. Slowly, Miss Lazar began lowering Mr. Klutz down with the rope. "It's working!" somebody shouted. "I'll say this much. You never know when one of those toilet bowl plunger thingies might come in handy. Mr. Klutz sure is lucky that he's bald, said Andrea. Wow, said Ryan. That plunger really sucks. Little by little, Miss Lazar let out the rope until Mr. Klutz's feet touched the ground. Then Miss Lazar climbed down the wall herself, and everybody started cheering and clapping. Hooray for Miss Lazar! Kids were shouting. Hip hip hooray! She's a real superhero! Thanks, Miss Lazar, said Mr. Klutz. You saved my life. It's all in a day's work, said Miss Lazar, as she got back on her scooter. Even on my day off. But now I must take my leave. You kids better get back to class. Duty calls. Miss Lazar had said duty again. After she buzzed away on her scooter, Mr. Klutz pulled at the plunger, but it was stuck to his head pretty tightly. He said he didn't mind because it had saved his life, but he would look really funny in hats for a while. All the excitement was over, and we had to go back inside a boring old elementary school. Maybe someday we'll find out if Miss Liz is a real superhero or not. Maybe someday Mr. Klutz will get over his jealousy of Miss Lazar. Maybe someday we'll find out who put the crayons down the toilet. Maybe someday we'll find out what chicken pox has to do with chickens. Maybe someday Mr. Klutz will get the toilet bowl plunger off his head. Maybe someday I'll be able to hear the word duty and not start giggling. But it won't be easy.